Okay, YouTubers, D-Doc here. And the project for tonight, in putting this replacement 390 engine in this truck, the oil filter hangs down on this engine. But there's not enough room here to put a long oil filter. There's room for a short one, but not a long one. So, I'm going to have to replace this unit with another unit that'll bring the oil filter sticking out the side. So, first thing I need to do is take off this oil pressure switch lead. Take a pair of pliers and remove the oil pressure switch. I'm going to reuse that. Move that out of the way. I've already loosened some of these bolts. Let's go ahead and take them off. That's good and loose. And go by sense of feel here. There it is. Go ahead and pull those bolts out by hand. Now I thought this unit was going to work okay, so I went ahead and put a new gasket on it. So I'm just going to change the unit to a side mount head, and the gasket will still be good. And we'll just have to leave it that way. Long-winded little bolts. So it's something that probably would have been better done when I had the engine out, but I didn't. I actually thought that this unit would fit. Let's go ahead and put a socket on that. And then once I got the engine in here and tried to put the filter on, it won't fit. Like I said earlier, I could go get a short filter, but I'm not going to. I'll just use the other mount. And I think, get my rag here. Clean off the gasket just a little bit. Alright. Let's get this other unit, which I've already cleaned. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple bolts in this to help line it up. Get that one started. Make sure I get this one started. And I'll go ahead and start the other two bolts on the bottom. And that's the unit I just took off. Duh. Well, you got to catch the doctor and a little faux pas here. So let's try this again. Good old YouTube comedy entertainment. Let's try this a second time with the correct unit. And of course, there's no room to get that bolt in with the socket on. And I suppose I could go get a short socket. That means I'd have to climb out of this engine compartment. And I'm not as nimble as I used to be. So let's try this a second time. See if I can hit them holes a second time. Whoops. There's one. Get it started, a couple threads. See if I can get that one started. That feels better. Let's get a bottom one started. That feels good. Get this one started. I think I'll run these 3 easy ones down by hand. That's better. Back to the difficult one. There it bit. This particular oil filter unit doesn't leave you a lot of finger room here to get this top bolt, but I'll do it the best I can. All right. That's nice. Now we can use the ratchet action. And I want to be sure to get these bolts snug first before I tighten them down. Now I'm sure there's probably a torque specification for torquing these bolts. But back in the day before we had access to a torque wrench, Dad taught us how to tighten them down by sense of feel. That's what I'm going to do. Alright, now I can bear down on them a bit. Of course, you don't want to crank down on these too awful hard. You'll break the aluminum casting. So we're going to get them good and snug tight. Yeah. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the oil pressure switch back in. And tighten that down with that pair of pliers. That's sufficiently snug. We'll clip the oil pressure switch lead back on the node. Now, an important lesson I've learned through the years. This engine hasn't run for probably 20 years, so that means there has been no oil or lubrication at all in the top end. So what I did is I went ahead and filled up the oil filter over 2 days and let the oil saturate into the filtering element. And then before I got started here tonight, I topped it off with oil so that when I get to eventually starting this engine, it will immediately pull oil out of the filter to lubricate the engine. If you don't fill the filter ahead of time, then the oil has to come up from the oil pan and get pumped into the oil filter first before it goes back into the engine. In the meantime, while you're waiting for that oil to get circulated up into the top of the engine and work its way back down, I've got old metal against metal here, so that would give me a whole lot more metal shavings. So it's wiser to go ahead and fill up the oil filter, take a couple of days and let it saturate into the element, the filter element, and then top it off. Now it's going to be a trick to try to get this sideways onto this stud and not spill a lot of oil out of the filter. So I'm going to have to act fast. So let's give it a try here. There we go. And of course, I did take oil on that rubber gasket on top of the oil filter. We'll use the old one. You always want to make sure you dip your finger in some oil and rub oil around this gasket to provide a better seal. So I've already done that on this filter. And then you want to tighten it down good and hand tight. Don't use your filter wrench. That's good and hand tight. All done. Oil in the filter. When I go to start the engine, there'll be oil immediately coming into the engine as opposed to not having the filter cleaned up. So there we go. This step is done. On to the next project.